Good evening and welcome to my channel. Russia has betrayed the United States by feeding Iran real-time intelligence about exact locations of American military bases, warships, and aircraft throughout the Middle East, turning every U.S. service member in the region into sitting ducks for Iranian missile strikes that have already killed Americans and are getting more accurate with each attack because Moscow is providing Tehran with targeting data that makes defensive preparations impossible. This isn't speculation. This is confirmed reporting from Washington Post, citing multiple U.S. officials who state that Russia has been sharing comprehensive intelligence on U.S. force positions since the war began 1 week ago, creating strategic alliance between Moscow and Tehran, specifically designed to maximize American casualties and force Trump to withdraw from Middle East in humiliating defeat that would be greatest Russian geopolitical victory since Cold War. Russia knows where our carriers are. Russia knows which bases host which units. Russia knows flight patterns, supply routes, and defensive weaknesses. And Russia is giving all of this information directly to Iranian Revolutionary Guard so that when Iran fires ballistic missiles at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar or launches anti-ship weapons at USS Abraham Lincoln carrier, they're not guessing. They're hitting coordinates that Russian satellites photographed and Russian intelligence analyzed and Russian military advisors packaged into targeting data that Iranian forces use to kill Americans. This is active betrayal happening right now while thousands of American troops across Gulf region shelter in bunkers wondering if next Iranian missile has their name on it because Russian intelligence officer decided to share their exact position with enemy, explicitly trying to kill them. Let me give you a complete picture of how comprehensive and devastating this Russian betrayal is, because what we're seeing represents fundamental shift in global power dynamics, where Russia has decided that helping Iran kill Americans serves Russian strategic interests better than maintaining any pretense of cooperation with the United States. According to Washington Post, reporting published yesterday citing multiple U.S. officials with direct knowledge of intelligence assessments, Russia began providing Iran with detailed information about U.S. military positions shortly after American and Israeli strikes commenced on February 28th. This intelligence sharing isn't limited to general strategic information like U.S. has forces in Persian Gulf. This is specific tactical data, including exact coordinates of military installations, real-time positions of warships tracked by Russian reconnaissance satellites, flight schedules and routes of American aircraft conducting missions over Iranian territory, and defensive capabilities and weaknesses of U.S. bases that Iranian forces can exploit when planning attacks. One U.S. official told Washington Post that Russian coordination with Iran seems like it's a pretty comprehensive effort, indicating systematic intelligence sharing across all domains rather than isolated incidents. The implications are staggering when you understand operational reality. Every U.S. military base in Middle East operates under assumption that enemy might know general location. You can't hide Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, which is visible from commercial satellites, but specific intelligence about which buildings house command centers, where ammunition is stored, which bunkers protect critical personnel, what defensive systems guard perimeter, and when forces conduct shift changes or resupply operations is supposed to be protected, information that adversaries cannot easily obtain. Russia has satellites capable of photographing these installations with resolution measuring inches, not feet, allowing identification of specific vehicles, equipment, and personnel movements. Russia has signals intelligence capabilities that can intercept communications, revealing operational patterns. Russia has human intelligence networks throughout Middle East that observe and report on American activities. And Russia has military analysis expertise that can synthesize raw data into actionable targeting packages that Iranian forces who lack these sophisticated intelligence capabilities can immediately employ. When Iran fires ballistic missile at U.S. base and hits specific building killing Americans inside, that's not luck. That's precise targeting enabled by intelligence that only nation-state adversary with advanced surveillance capabilities could provide. And according to U.S. officials, Russia is providing exactly that level of support to Iran, creating a situation where American forces are exposed to threats they were never designed to face because defensive planning assumed adversaries wouldn't have detailed knowledge of their positions and vulnerabilities. Most dangerous manifestation of Russian intelligence sharing involves U.S. Navy warships operating in confined waters of Persian Gulf and Arabian Sea. Aircraft carriers are massive vessels that cannot hide, but their exact positions at any moment are classified, because knowing where carrier is located allows adversary to position anti-ship missiles along predicted path or concentrate submarines in area where carrier will transit, creating ambush scenarios that could sink ship, killing 5,000 sailors. Russia has constellation of reconnaissance satellites specifically designed to track NATO naval forces. During Cold War, Soviet Union invested enormous resources into systems for locating and targeting American carriers, because destroying these ships was primary Soviet naval objective in any conflict. Those systems still exist, now operated by Russian military, and according to U.S. officials, are being used to track American carriers in real time with position data shared directly with Iran. Iranian forces possess Chinese-supplied anti-ship missiles designed specifically to kill carriers through supersonic speed and sea-skimming flight profiles that make interception difficult. But successfully employing these weapons requires knowing where target will be when missile arrives, because carriers can travel 30 miles per hour, creating large search areas that missiles might not find if initial targeting data is inaccurate. Russian intelligence solves this problem by providing Iranian forces with current carrier positions and predicted movement corridors, allowing Tehran to position missiles optimally and time attacks for maximum effectiveness. USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group, operating in Arabian Sea, has been conducting flight operations supporting strikes on Iranian targets. Lincoln is protected by escort ships equipped with advanced air defenses and operates with strict communications discipline to prevent adversaries from tracking its position. But if Russian satellites are photographing Lincoln every few hours and sharing images with Iran, all operational security measures become irrelevant, because enemy knows exactly where you are regardless of how carefully you hide electronic signatures. Similarly concerning is intelligence about aircraft. American stealth fighters, including F-22 Raptors and F-35 Lightning IIs, are designed to evade radar detection, allowing them to penetrate defended airspace and strike targets without being engaged by enemy air defenses. But stealth technology doesn't make aircraft invisible to satellite imagery. Russian satellites can photograph American aircraft taking off from bases, track their general direction, and analyze flight patterns to predict strike corridors and timing. If Russia shares this intelligence with Iran, Iranian air defenses can pre-position along predicted routes, creating ambush where surface-to-air missiles are waiting when stealth aircraft arrive. This would explain why Iran has claimed shooting down or damaging multiple American aircraft during current conflict, claims that U.S. hasn't confirmed but also hasn't definitively denied. If Russian intelligence is enabling Iranian air defenses to track invisible stealth aircraft, American losses could be significantly higher than Pentagon is publicly acknowledging. Ground forces face even more immediate danger from Russian intelligence sharing. Approximately 30,000 American military personnel are stationed across Middle East in bases throughout Qatar, UAE, Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Iraq. Each base has specific defensive preparations, including bunkers where personnel shelter during missile attacks, surface-to-air missile batteries that engage incoming threats, and early warning systems that detect launches, allowing time to take protective measures. But if Iran knows exactly which bunkers personnel use, they can target those specific structures with penetrating warheads designed to collapse reinforced concrete, killing everyone inside. If Iran knows where defensive systems are positioned, they can plan missile trajectories that avoid those zones or fire saturation salvos that overwhelm specific defensive positions. And if Iran knows early warning system capabilities and limitations, they can time attacks to minimize warning period or employ tactics that exploit sensor gaps. This is why U.S. officials are describing situation as sitting ducks. American forces are following established defensive procedures that were designed assuming enemy had limited intelligence about their specific vulnerabilities. But when adversary has comprehensive intelligence provided by Russian sophisticated surveillance and analysis, standard defensive measures become inadequate, leaving personnel exposed to precision attacks they cannot adequately defend against. The question everyone is asking is why? Why would Russia betray United States by actively helping Iran kill American service members? What strategic calculation makes aiding enemy targeting of U.S. forces worth burning any remaining cooperation between Moscow and Washington? The answer lies in fundamental Russian objectives that Trump administration either misunderstood or chose to ignore. Russia under Vladimir Putin has single overriding strategic goal: restore Russian great power status by pushing United States out of Eurasia and establishing regional hegemony over former Soviet sphere and adjacent areas, including Middle East. Every Russian foreign policy action, from Ukraine invasion to Syria intervention to Iran partnership, serves this objective of displacing American influence and creating a multipolar world where Moscow is dominant regional power. American military presence in Middle East represents direct obstacle to Russian ambitions. U.S. bases throughout Gulf allow Washington to project power into region, protect allies, secure energy supplies, and prevent hostile powers from dominating area vital to global economy. If Russia can force American withdrawal from Middle East, it would create power vacuum that Moscow could fill through partnerships with Iran, Syria, and potentially Turkey, creating Russian sphere of influence stretching from Eastern Europe through Middle East to Persian Gulf. Helping Iran kill Americans serves Russian interests by increasing costs of U.S. military presence to point where Trump administration decides withdrawal is preferable to continuing operation that's bleeding personnel, draining resources, and creating political crisis at home through gas prices and economic disruption. Every American casualty strengthens domestic pressure for withdrawal. Every successful Iranian attack demonstrates that U.S. cannot protect its forces. Every intelligence leak from Russia makes American positions more vulnerable, forcing additional defensive investments or base repositioning. From Russian perspective, if Iran succeeds in forcing U.S. withdrawal from Gulf region, Russia gains enormous strategic advantage worth any deterioration in U.S.-Russia relations, which were already hostile before this intelligence sharing began. And critically, Russia calculates that U.S. won't retaliate militarily against Russia for intelligence sharing because that would mean direct U.S.-Russia conflict that nobody wants, and that benefits Iran by pulling American attention and resources away from Iranian theater. This is classic asymmetric strategy where Russia achieves strategic objectives through indirect means that stay below threshold, triggering major American response. Russia isn't sending troops to fight Americans. Russia isn't launching missiles at U.S. forces. Russia is merely sharing information that Iran uses independently to conduct its own operations. This gives Russia plausible deniability, claiming they're simply providing intelligence cooperation to strategic partner, which is exactly what U.S. does with Israel and other allies. But there's difference between normal intelligence sharing among allies and specifically providing targeting data designed to kill third parties' military personnel. What Russia is doing crosses line from legitimate partnership into active participation in Iranian military operations against United States. If Russian intelligence officer provides Iranian commander with coordinates of U.S. barracks and Iranian missile kills Americans sleeping in those barracks, Russian officer is morally and practically responsible for those deaths, even if he didn't personally launch weapon. U.S. officials speaking to Washington Post described Russian intelligence sharing as comprehensive effort, suggesting systematic program rather than isolated incidents. This indicates decision was made at senior levels of Russian government, likely requiring Putin's personal approval to provide Iran with full-spectrum intelligence support for duration of conflict. Such comprehensive program requires dedicating satellite surveillance, signals intelligence collection, analysis resources, and liaison personnel to work directly with Iranian forces, creating institutional commitment that goes beyond opportunistic information sharing. Evidence of Russian-Iranian coordination extends beyond satellite imagery and signals intelligence into military technical assistance. Reports indicate Russian military advisors are present in Iran, helping Revolutionary Guard operate advanced weapons systems, including sophisticated radar and air defense equipment that require specialized training. These advisors aren't just teaching Iranians how to use equipment, they're actively helping plan operations, analyze intelligence, and develop tactics optimized for striking American forces. Additionally, Russia has reportedly shared electronic warfare techniques that can jam or deceive American communications and sensors. Electronic warfare is a highly specialized domain where small advantages in capability can mean difference between successful attack and complete failure. Russian expertise in this area, developed over decades of Cold War competition with U.S. military, gives Iranian forces capabilities they wouldn't independently possess, allowing them to degrade American defensive effectiveness. The naval dimension question is particularly concerning given Russia's historical focus on anti-carrier warfare. Soviet Union developed entire military doctrines centered on destroying American carriers using submarines, bombers, and surface ships armed with supersonic anti-ship missiles. That expertise still exists in Russian military, which has institutional knowledge of tactics, weapons, and intelligence requirements for carrier strike operations. If Russian naval officers are advising Iranian forces on how to attack American carriers, sharing satellite tracking data, and providing tactical recommendations on weapons employment, Iran gains capability to conduct coordinated carrier strike campaign that could overwhelm American defenses. Sinking carrier would be greatest Iranian military achievement possibly in history and greatest U.S. naval disaster since Pearl Harbor, creating political earthquake, forcing fundamental reconsideration of American Middle East strategy. Congressional response has been swift and bipartisan. Multiple senators from both parties issued statements condemning Russian intelligence sharing and demanding Trump administration take action to counter this threat and potentially retaliate against Russia for actions that are getting Americans killed. Senator Mark Warner, vice chairman of Senate Intelligence Committee, stated that if reports are accurate, Russian intelligence sharing represents act of war against United States requiring presidential response. But what can Trump actually do in response? Military retaliation against Russia for intelligence sharing would risk escalation to direct U.S.-Russia conflict, possibly including nuclear exchange that neither side wants. Economic sanctions against Russia are already extensive from previous conflicts over Ukraine and Syria, making additional sanctions marginally effective at best. Diplomatic protests accomplish nothing when Russia has already decided that strategic benefits of helping Iran outweigh any American complaints. This leaves Trump with few good options. He can continue current military operations accepting higher American casualties from Iranian attacks enabled by Russian intelligence. He can withdraw forces from vulnerable positions, reducing exposure, but also reducing military effectiveness and allowing Iran to claim victory. He can attempt to strike Russian intelligence assets or advisors in Iranian territory, but killing Russian military personnel would absolutely trigger major Russian retaliation, creating multi-front war that U.S. is not prepared to fight. Most likely response is that Trump administration will intensify intelligence security measures attempting to limit what Russia can observe while acknowledging that fundamental problem, Russian satellite surveillance of U.S. forces, cannot be solved short of destroying Russian satellites, which would be act of war against nuclear power. Meanwhile, American troops continue operating in an environment where adversary knows their positions, making every mission more dangerous and every base more vulnerable. Pentagon is conducting emergency review of force protection measures across all Middle East installations, attempting to identify vulnerabilities that Russian intelligence might have revealed and implement countermeasures. But this is a reactive posture that assumes damage is already done and focuses on limiting future exposure rather than preventing initial intelligence compromise that already occurred. Some military experts are recommending dispersing American forces from large permanent bases into smaller temporary positions that move frequently, making targeting more difficult. But this lily pad approach reduces operational efficiency, strains logistics, and creates force protection challenges when smaller units lack robust defenses that major bases provide. Subscribe right now because this Russian betrayal fundamentally changes strategic calculation for entire Middle East conflict and potentially for broader U.S.-Russia relations that will shape geopolitics for decades. When next Iranian missile hits U.S. base with suspicious accuracy, when Russia shares intelligence enabling even more devastating attacks, when Trump decides whether to retaliate against Russia risking World War III or accept that American forces are operating without intelligence security. This channel explains implications as they develop. Before you go, answer critical question. Should Trump withdraw U.S. forces from Middle East to protect them from Russian-enabled Iranian attacks, or does withdrawal hand Russia strategic victory they're seeking? Comment A, B, or C. A, withdraw immediately. American lives matter more than Middle East presence. B, stay and fight, but implement countermeasures limiting Russian intelligence effectiveness. C, retaliate against Russia, directly showing Moscow there are consequences for getting Americans killed. Drop your answer now. Russia betrayed America, feeding Iran targeting data, American soldiers sitting ducks, comprehensive intelligence sharing, satellite tracking carriers, revealing base vulnerabilities, Iranian missiles getting more accurate, Americans dying because Russians told Iranians where to shoot. This is active participation in Iranian war against United States, and Trump must decide response knowing every option has dangerous consequences. Subscribe now. I will see you in next update.